I'm Claudia Bester. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Hammer Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the Billy Wilder Theater tonight for our screening of The Sea Around Us. I want to thank our co-presenters, the UCLA Department of Design and Media Arts and the UCLA Institute of the Environment and Sustainability. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the publication of Rachel Carson's landmark book, The Sea Around Us. To Carson, the ocean was our ancestor, our teacher, and our lifeline. And as a visionary marine biologist, writer, and leader of the environmentalist movement, she represented the science of the ocean alongside an ethic of accountability to what she termed the Mother Sea. And tonight's event is part of a series organized by UCLA professors Rebeca Méndez and Elizabeth DeLoughrey as part of their current UCLA course, The Sea Around Us, inspired by Carson's book. And tonight, as the final event of the series, we're really thrilled to present this visionary artwork, The Sea Around Us by Rebeca Méndez. The Sea Around Us is an immersive cinematic experience, and I had the great privilege to see it in person in the full 4-channel immersion at the Laguna Art Museum in 2023, and then again here at the White Gallery earlier this year. And tonight, you'll all see the premiere of the new single-channel version, which was created especially for the screen here at the Billy Wilder Theater. So this is a premiere of sorts. Rebeca Méndez's The Sea Around Us is a work responding to the shocking revelation that over 500,000 barrels of toxic chemicals, including the pesticide DDT, acid sludge, and radioactive waste, were dumped into the ocean off Santa Catalina Island between 1947 and 1972, with disastrous implications for marine and human ecologies. Méndez's vision weaves together underwater footage, indigenous knowledge systems, and song, and poetic storytelling into a call to action for care and accountability for our source of life. Following the screening of this 45-minute artist film, we're honored to have a conversation between Rebeca Méndez, UCLA professor Elizabeth DeLoughrey, and the investigative journalist Rosanna Xia, whose expose in the LA Times brought the chemical dumping ground to light. And they'll also take some audience questions after the film, and then after the discussion and Q&A, we'd like to invite you all to continue the conversation over some light refreshments outside the theater lobby. So now I'd like to introduce the artist herself, and then she's going to come and say a few words about the film. Rebeca Méndez is an interdisciplinary artist, designer, and educator examining reciprocal relationships and environmental justice in a multi-species world among climate change, mass extinction, and an extractivist society. Her fieldwork has taken her to vulnerable environments and communities in the Arctic and threatened ecologies in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. Her artworks are driven by her interest in perception and embodied experience as immersive video and sound installations, public art, film, and performance. Bridging scientific and indigenous perspectives, she's collaborated with major scientific institutions and the Acjachemen, Tongva, Abalone, and Zapotec communities. Her exhibitions include Into the Time Horizon at the Nevada Art Museum, 3 PST Art and Science Collide exhibitions, including Storm Cloud, Picturing Our Climate Crisis at the Huntington Museum, as well as the first Gangwon International Triennial and the 55th Venice Biennale. Her work is in the permanent collections of LACMA, the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the Museum of Contemporary Art Oaxaca, and the El Paso Museum of Art. And she's the recipient of a California Community Foundation Fellowship and a National Design Award. Méndez is also a professor in the Design Media Arts Department at UCLA and the founder and director of the Counterforce Lab, a research studio that harnesses the power of art and design to engage with the reality of the global ecological crisis and its ties to environmental injustice. So now please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Rebeca Méndez.
Hi, everyone. This is so wonderful to see so many familiar faces and friends and new faces. So welcome. And I want to thank Claudia and her team for being essential partners in bringing our 3 events to fruition. And thank you to the UCLA Teaching and Learning Center for your support. It brings me great joy to share with you my video artwork, The Sea Around Us. My artwork takes its title from Rachel Carson's 1951 book, The Sea Around Us, in which the author writes, "Fish, amphibian, and reptile, warm-blooded bird and mammal, each of us carries in our veins a salty stream in which the elements sodium, potassium, and calcium are combined in almost the same proportions as in seawater." Carson reminds us that we owe our very existence to the ocean. Many of you may know Carson's groundbreaking book, Silent Spring, from 1962, which revealed the disastrous impacts of DDT and sparked the modern environmental movement. Yet few remember that in the 50s, she was a bestseller author of a wondrous trilogy of books on the sea, awakening the public to fascination with and the love for the world's oceans as much as Jacques Cousteau and Sylvia Earle would do. I was part of that public. The Sea Around Us was commissioned by the Laguna Art Museum. It's a 6-channel, 360-degree immersive and cinematic experience that portrays the adjacent Pacific Ocean as a fully animated body, as well as a place of deep interconnectedness, where multi-species kinship fosters a sense of awe within us. The Sea Around Us shown here tonight is a theater version of this multimedia installation. This video artwork is a result of what is known as a research and fieldwork-based artistic practice. I will take you through the process of creating the work as a means to illuminate what this type of practice entails and how such a project engages with Indigenous communities and the work of scientists. The curator, Marcus Raymond, has written, "One mandate of the arts is to make the invisible visible and provide society with a mirror, allowing us to position ourselves in time, but also to question these times and circumstances and systems." This is certainly part of what I was trying to accomplish with this work. The Sea Around Us responds to the legacy and ongoing effects of poisonous waste dumping right off the Southern California coast. Through special reports by Los Angeles Times environment reporter Rosanna Xia, I learned that beginning in 1947 and continuing through at least 1972, the Montrose Chemical Corporation and others dumped over 25,000 barrels of the pesticide DDT, acid sludge, and radioactive waste into the ocean near Santa Catalina Island, just 30 miles from the coast of Los Angeles, where I live. Thanks to the advocacy inspired by Rachel Carson, in 1972, the Environmental Protection Agency largely banned the use of DDT in the United States because of its adverse environmental effects and its potential risks to human health. Investigations by scientists is ongoing, but it appears that the equivalent of around 500,000 barrels of chemicals, including radioactive waste, was dumped into the ocean at 14 sites between Palos Verdes and Catalina Island, and they still lie there oozing their toxic payload that we now must confront. And I think that one of the things that we learned during the symposium is that actually all of this was just dumped uncontained. So what's in the barrels is a different thing, and we will talk about in our conversation. These materials have bioaccumulated across the food web, affecting the lives of our human and more than human kin. Research by Dr. Alisa Deming of the Pacific Marine Mammal Center in Laguna Beach shows that almost 20% of the sea lions in the California Bight have cancer, a much higher percentage than elsewhere. Their metabolism is very similar to that of humans, so the study of DDT effects in sea lions and other marine mammals is critical for our own health. The Sea Around Us incorporates a scientific video captured by robots at depth of around 3,000 feet. UC Santa Barbara professor Dr. David Valentine, and the Smith-Ocean Institute kindly allowed me to use the revelatory footage in this artwork. The 55-gallon barrel, which plays a leading role in my artwork, is the symbol of some of the most earth-devouring industries in the 20th century, from fossil fuels to forever chemicals and radioactive materials. Today, we are forced to contend with its controversial heritage on land, in the air, and beneath the ocean's surface. To face unmitigated disasters such as the ravages of DDT, the author Donna Haraway, a feminist theorist who is committed to multi-species environmental justice, proposes that we stay with the trouble. That is, that we confront the repercussions of our troubled times and embrace our connections with our non-human kin. Only then we will reckon with our dominion and negligence, while repositioning ourselves as similarly threatened critters in the Anthropocene. It is from this position of equality and vulnerability that we open our imaginations to other ways of knowing and being on this planet. The sea around us embraces indigeneity as a profound way to relate to the ever-changing waterscape of the ocean and to inspire different modes of engagement with the natural world through which old and new imaginaries and cosmologies are brought to the foreground. Anishinaabe writer Robin Wall Kimmerer points out that in the Western tradition, humans are at the pinnacle of evolution, while in native ways of knowing, human people are often referred to the younger brothers of creation. Humans have the least experience with how to live and thus the most to learn, and must look to other species for guidance. For the sea around us, I sought guidance from and entered into kinship with abalone, a shelled marine snail that reflects the time immemorial of the sea, bringing us into the depths of geologic time some 100 million years ago, and informing the imagery and cosmology of cultures both ancient and present. These include the Tongva people, who began living in Catalina at least 8,000 years ago, and the Acjachemen, who have lived along the coast for what is now Orange County for at least 10,000 years. The abalone, and especially its shell, entered into Indigenous peoples' cultures through subsistence, ceremony, and ornamentation. Abalone shells still play a prominent role in the traditional hupa ceremony in Northern California that marks girls' coming of age, serving as a kind of looking glass that reflects a vision of their future. Having researched Indigenous transformational objects, I envisioned the abalone shell as a portal, guiding us away from a self-making world towards a making-with world, together and deeply interconnected. I work with 3 generations of Acjachemen women, filming them interacting with the abalone shell underwater and recording them as they sang together. Flowing through the experience is their song intended to encourage listeners to embrace the natural world through alternative values and worldviews. I am grateful to Adelia Sandoval, the spiritual overseer of the Acjachemen, and Tina Calderon, a culture bearer of Gabrielino, Tongva, Chumash, and Yoeme descent, who collaborated with me to embody this vision. When the stories we tell about the ocean are rooted primarily in utilitarian purposes, transportation, militarization, and extraction, we miss thinking of the ocean as alive, as full of spiritual, cultural, and ecological value. I hope my artwork provides an opening for viewers to enter into that way of thinking. The curator, Stephanie Hessler, has written, "While the arts may hardly save us, they could possibly generate momentary flashes of light that touch us, that wake us up, and that show us that there may still be other ways." May the sea around us be one of those flashes. Enjoy the film.
So now I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished guests for tonight's conversation, Rebeca Méndez, Rosanna Xia, and Elizabeth DeLoughrey. Rosanna Xia is an author, documentary filmmaker, and environmental reporter for the Los Angeles Times, where she specializes in stories about the coast and the ocean. Xia was named a Pulitzer Prize finalist in 2020 for explanatory reporting, and her celebrated book on climate change adaptation, California Against the Sea, received the PEN America E.O. Wilson Literary Science Writing Award, as well as a gold medal from the California Book Awards and a special citation from the Library of Congress, among others. She's been praised for her investigative reporting and narrative storytelling, and her journalism has been anthologized in the Best American Science and Nature Writing series. After reporting on the dumping of toxic chemicals off the coast of LA, she co-directed and produced the feature documentary Out of Plain Sight, which we screened here just about a week and a half ago. Our moderator this evening is Elizabeth DeLoughrey. She's a professor in the English department at UCLA with an affiliation with the UCLA Institute of the Environment and Sustainability. And she works in the fields of Caribbean, Pacific Island, and Indigenous studies with an emphasis on ocean ecologies. She's the author of multiple books in these fields and has received awards and grants from the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation, the American Council of Learned Societies, Fulbright New Zealand, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Rachel Carson Center for Environment and Society in Munich. And she's also a member of the UNESCO Working Group on Underwater Cultural Heritage for the International Seabed Authority. And of course, the artist Rebeca Méndez, who I introduced previously. Just a quick reminder that after this conversation and audience Q&A, we're going to continue the conversation over some light refreshments just outside the theater lobby. So now please join me in welcoming artist Rebeca Méndez, journalist and filmmaker Rosanna Xia, and scholar Elizabeth DeLoughrey.
Welcome, everyone. I feel like I need a little bit of breath after that. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for that just stunning installation. I'm just so happy to be here. And I'm so thankful that you're all here. Thank you to the Hammer staff for taking such good care of us today, but also on our marathon day 2 weeks ago, where we were here from about 2 until midnight. I think we closed the place so quickly. The Hammer is becoming a second home for us. And also I wanted to thank our students who have also been teaching us so much in this process. We're so happy you're here. We know you're in the middle of finals and you're preparing final papers and exams and books. So we're just really happy to have this conversation. A lot of the pedagogy that we're using in our class is that our knowledge is collaborative rather than someone holding a certain kind of knowledge. So part of that is about the teaching, but it's also about the conversation that we're having here. And I'm so happy to be in conversation with Rosanna again. I feel like you're the professional moderator, so I'm just kind of an interloper for, for our conversation here. So some of the things that we're covering in our class are thinking about the ocean and temporality. We've been thinking about multi-species kinship. We've even had a section on militarized dolphins. I mean, it's been a really amazing class that we've been sharing together. And I've been lucky enough to have seen the first iteration of The Sea Around Us down in Laguna Art Museum, which was a 6-channel submersive installation, and so submersive that some people felt seasick and they had to leave. So, and then we did another installation for our students at the Broad building at the EDA room on campus at UCLA, and that was a 5-channel installation. And that one was just such an amazing experience too. We used it as part of our first class, so we all walked in and everyone's kind of full of the energy of, you know, just getting together and having your first day of teaching and of meeting your peers. And so there's all this kind of energy as we walked into the room, and then within, I think, 20 minutes, every single student was sitting on the ground, quiet, and we were all just having this meditative experience with the work. And so it's really exciting to see it here in this 3rd iteration. So one of the things I was hoping we could get to is thinking about, although my field mostly is writing, I'm really curious about the visual element here. So Rebecca, one of the things we've been engaging in our class is thinking about how to make the invisible visible, and this is something that ties entirely to Rosanna's work as well. The title of your film is Out of Plain Sight, right? And so I think these are very important connected projects, thinking about how we can make this history of whether it's DDT plus and radioactive barrel dumping visible, but also other kinds of stories like Indigenous stories, right, that are so erased in the settler colonial context in which we live in. So I wonder if you could talk just a bit about the process of moving from these different kinds of channel installations and your process for this one. And then also we can open it up to think a little bit more about visibility and why that's so important as an aesthetic.
Thank you for that question. And then again, thank you everyone. It's just wonderful to see you here. It has been an interesting thing to know that the piece itself was conceived to be, immersive environment, 6-channel, 5.1 sound, and in a space that was 1,400 square feet. So that's something that immediately you think about the ways in which, as you are walking around, even though we put a few benches, we knew that the experience needed to be you moving about. So the body was much more involved in that case. And it definitely was beautiful to see that people would just lie down on the ground and watch it again and again and again. It's as if they had encountered a space for the soul, for like the repose of the soul or something. But it was we don't have, almost no one has the ability to be able to, go down and one can be a diver, one can be experiencing that, but the physics of the space, the temporality of the space, the creatures you encounter. So it truly is a world that it's so different. So when I created that space, it was about, how can we transform ourselves and become perhaps a creature of the sea the best way we can. I think the experiences that I have had that are the most beautiful ones have been diving, and especially in the nothingness, right? The moment that you are pitch black at the bottom and, just there is something about forgetting your humanity. And that is where there's a lot of work that happens in the becoming other in this work, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But then when we moved into the 5-channel, right, I think that still at Art Center, it's like I'm going back, decades, many decades. At UCLA, it was interesting because it's as if we missed a little bit that entrance, but not that much. Mm-hmm. One could still have that immersive experience. And, the UCLA space has certain doors, it's a bit fragmented. So it was very conscious that there was a physical space, and yet there was still a sense of immersive quality. We showed it as well at the AGU, at the Geosophical Society, right? That was another one. And that one was a very different kind of space. It was an auditorium for about 2,500 people. And it was like 120 feet long. So we had to narrow the piece a lot more. And it was 3 kind of screens, 30 feet each. No more. It was just so much. So that was a strange thing because we had to crop our frame a lot. Here, and therefore also we're having the cropping of the frame. What's interesting about the auditorium here is that you focus on every scene. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how many people said, well, I never saw that scene. I never experienced that, because you cannot be in all of them at once. So it really has been a fascinating thing to retool the scenes and just continuing with the same, of course, arc and the sensations that I'm trying to put forth, but that it is a different experience. I think each one has its own. I love your thoughts, because you have been in 3 of them and in 2 of them. Mm-hmm.
If I could just do a follow-up before we turn to Rosanna's film, one of the things that I found very interesting was there's still a sense of the fracturing once you have it on a single screen, the fact that you're actually watching two different scenes, I think that in of itself is quite powerful, because there's a sense of, just like when you're in the ocean, and I know some of our colleagues who are ocean scientists know this, that when you're in there in the deep and you're filming something, you don't know if something's behind you, right? And so there's a sense that you have to keep using all different kinds of senses, and that's something we've been discussing a lot in our class about the haptic, the different kinds of sensing that the abalone represents. So that was one of the things that I found quite striking here. But one of the things I wanted to go back to is actually just ask you to talk about why you did the 6 channels.
Yeah. 6, I think it was the length of the space, right? At one point it was like 60 feet across, and the depth was only about 25. So I think that the technology itself, right, it was a big part of ¿Qué onda? Son 7. Yes. yes. That's an interesting one. Yeah. But it was, I think that if I think I went technical here, but it's, in terms of the ideas, yes. Thank you for that, reminding me of that. When I was, I got in contact with Tina Orduno Calderon of the Tongva culture bearer. She talked a lot about the different cosmologies about the Tongva, and that there are 7 directions to the Tongva tradition. And what is different is that it is, of course, the north, south, east, west. But there is definitely the above and below and the self. So that was something that it was critical in creating that space, to be able to arrive to that sense of presence, that you yourself complete the experience and the really existence. So I think that was a key part of that. Gracias for reminding. I'm caught in like the space and how we made it happen and the sound.
Rosanna, do you want to weigh in terms of thinking about your own transition from writing to becoming a film director?
I just want to say bravo. It's really beautiful and moving to see how your project has not evolved, but found, like, you identified the soul and the spirit, and then it's continued to adapt and iterate based on the space and the audience. And I think watching it tonight, it really reminded me, like, as a journalist, I am so focused often on, how people are supposed to think, and how I'm supposed to translate the science, and just focused on the intellectual aspects of the story. And your piece just reminded me that it's so important to also anchor in what you want people to feel. And I was also kind of reminded of, the many times I've tried to like meditate, and everyone's like, you got to do it for more than 5 minutes. It's like, you got to keep hanging on, like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And there's like something about just really settling into this piece in the space with all of you. Like, I just was so grounded, and I just felt grounded and transported, and I think just like lost all sense of time and space, and it was just very, very beautiful. I forgot the question. I am so just moved by I'm also just like I don't know what headspace I'm in right now, given what you've just shared with us.
But I think this is also an important part of our experience in terms of viewing, right? So this is what I love about the 7 directions, that there's someone who's perceiving in the middle of this, right? So it's not just information that we receive because, it's there on a plaque or it's there on a film, but there's a process that involves us. And I think that's a really important part of knowledge creating and knowledge sharing, right? And it's also, thinking, I don't know if people have been following Michael Pollan's recent work, but the way in which our consciousness is being hijacked by all our different devices. So to actually sit and just meditate on these images, and the slowness, I think, is really, and I think what's so beautiful about it is that it slows us down, but it also reminds us of the deep evolutionary time of the ocean, and the way in which, as you had mentioned, Rachel Carson's 1951 book, The Sea Around Us, points out that, that we carry the ocean in our blood because we have evolved from who she called our ocean mother, right? And so establishing those elements of kinship in an evolutionary sense, but also in a reminder that this is an ongoing element of it, right? It's not just a part of the past. And I was just thinking also the temporality that's so painful about the film too is that we know that these are forever chemicals. So the deep time is not just the past, it's also our future.
And that's exactly why I think at a point, and we go about the staying with the trouble, and I don't know if you had other questions in mind, but it's like the idea that we have been so kind of separated from that connection to the natural world, and that, first in the film is like, I really want you to slow down so much. So kind of even just that little fish that's just staring at you, or the little angel kind of like, deep sea creature that happened to come up to feed because it was like for them like a feeding frenzy, because there was so much plankton and so much life. For us, we were, and I have to do a shout out to my underwater cinematographer that I know you're here, Tyler Schiffman. My goodness, is like working with you is incredible. Love you for that. We entered into the world of kind of like that deep, the deep sea creatures came to feed. And that was a very lucky thing because it was murky as hell. And we were like, it's just warm and it's murky. And then suddenly, and when we still have to film, we're in front of an acapa. And then, suddenly we're filming and all these beautiful beings that are coming out. And they're just reminding us, it's like, we're here. It's like, just look at us and film us. And it was quite beautiful. I don't know where I was going.
I think you were doing something on kinship, which I can
yes,
also
kinship.
follow up on, but also what's
the
important too, because
we'll go later on that.
We have a section. I know. I think I'm just going to give up on my questions. We're just going to have a conversation here. One of the things that we've been talking about is the microbial abyss, right? And so the importance of microbes, which are also our evolutionary ancestors. And so what I love about this is that so much of the representation of the ocean generally is what we can see through seawater. Like we want to see the boat, we want to see the whale, we want to see the dolphin. We actually don't want to see the seawater itself because it blurs our vision, right? And so I love that this is, one of the reminders from the ocean, and we talk about ocean as teacher, right? And so the non-human and the more than human as teacher is that reminder to you, even in your own submerged experience, right?
Well, I was looking at how clear some of the water is, and I was thinking of how cold the water must have been because of clear it was. So shout out to Tyler and the whole team as well. That you must have filmed in the winter to have such clear water in the kelp forest.
Yeah, we filmed in days that it was, as soon as we would, go down and then film, and we'd have to come up and literally pour like almost like boiling water inside of the wetsuit, because it was like, and Nicole, my actant, Nicole Gormley, incredible deep sea free diver, and one of the things that helped so much in terms of being able to be a very lean crew, because basically we were, Tyler, Nicole, Connor, our captain, safety diver, and sea urchin diver. Sea urchin diver, yeah. And Adam doing the catering, and myself, right? So we were all like just going to 14, 15 different shoots. And it was just the way in which we were, engaging in those, super cold waters, and just, coming up, going to sleep a little, taking a nap, and then going back again. We would leave in the dark and come back in the dark. But so it was clear water. I don't know where I was going with that.
Kinship.
But kinship. Abalone. So this is the beautiful thing about going into a non-charismatic creature. Like it's not a dolphin, it's not a whale. I wanted to befriend abalone. An abalone, not just because it's odd, but it is that creature that connected everything that was part of what I wanted to convey from, again, 100 million years ago, that it's, some of its existence, fossils, or what we can find. But it is how it begins to enter indigenous cultures as, not only, the local indigenous cultures, but globally. As a Mexican, it's like we know that in the Aztecs, we have our gods of Tezcatlipoca, which is the god of war. It's like has a medallion of abalone. And then Chalchiuquitle, that it is the goddess of waters, rivers, oceans, eyes of abalone. So to enter into kinship, to really interspecies friendships has been in my research for a long time and in my projects, and it is a way to decenter the human perspective and to really try to get to know another being. Obviously, we cannot really enter the subjective of another, right? That is not even between humans we can do that. So even just as a proposition to become animal, to become abalone, to befriend them. I mean, the very first time that I tried feeding abalone, I think I shared that, but it is, they eat kelp. And so I have a little piece of kelp, and it's just I'm going down and I'm trying to feed. As a friend, you are kind. It's about care and kindness. And I'm feeding is like not taking. I was feeding it through its butt. So I just did not know what end was front and what end was. So it's like that. Kind of like the just when you're young, when you're a child, it's like you make friends, but you feel incredibly insecure. So befriending those creatures like the giant deep sea mucus larvacean, that was your article as well. That really inspired me to honestly begin to befriend the oddest creatures. So that I could completely move. And I need to say that it was, nothing of this would have happened if I would have come across your incredible reportage of the deep seas. Like when I was asked to do this piece, all I wanted to do express the polyvocality of the ocean, to really express all the voices from currents to, yes, the sea lions, and we'll get into the sea lions. But of course, your research immediately puts me into the DDT and poisoning.
Thank you. I'm also really glad that you connected with the abalone. I remember sending you that article and also the giant larvation, because my editor and I always joke, he'll be like, what weird sea creature that is not charismatic are you going to write about next? Because I'm obsessed with worms and invertebrates, and the weirder they are, the more I'm interested in writing about them.
And the most recent deep sea worm that was just discovered was named after Rachel Carson by a team down at Scripps.
Yes, it's beautiful. Like Rachel Carsonate, which is gorgeous, right?
She would love it.
Yeah, she would love it. Yeah.
Do you want to?
I was gonna say, show of hands, who did see Out of Plain Sight a week and a half ago as part of the series?
Okay. Wow.
Okay, great. So, I mean, I'll no spoilers, but I think I'm really struck by and grateful for our films to be in conversation with each other, because watching the single channel version of The Sea Around Us Tonight just made me really think about some of the decisions we made as a film team for Out of Plain Sight early on. One of them was to not have an underwater cinematographer. Like, if for those who did watch the film, we didn't go underwater. We kind of really indexed on the fact that we do have a tendency we have a land-centric way of thinking about our relationship to the planet, and that is part of the problem, that we feel like we are so disconnected from the ocean, even though we are a planet of water, and we are able to dump our industrial waste and all the things that we don't want too close to home on land, and just to dump into the ocean and think that it can be out of sight and out of mind. And so very early on, when we were talking to our cinematographer and our composer, we were like, okay, we're not going to make this a nature doc. We're not really going to lean into the aesthetics that you would usually expect when you're making a film about the ocean, partly because it was also inaccessible, right? And I think that a lot of the story was this was allowed to happen because we couldn't see it, and then it was allowed to be forgotten because we couldn't see it until the technology was made possible. I think what you were saying earlier about making the invisible visible, what does it mean to track a forever chemical that you can't see through the ecosystem as it accumulates, as it continues its insidious, layered, multi-generational consequences, and its impacts. And so, for us, our cinematographer made the decision to make the film. It's dark, it's beautiful, but there's like a dark tension that's simmering right underneath the surface. And I think for me, it's like watching the sea around us today, like the underwater footage, the spiritual aspects of it, you brought so many of those layers together, and it was another form of bringing the invisible to light. And I just feel like it's such an interesting pairing of visual mediums to really explore the story, and I was really struck by that. I think also, I don't know if I was really struck by the music too, and I think that our composer was so core to the making of our film, because it really was, the story began with sound. You know, he said that we discovered the barrels because of the sonar pings.
Yeah.
And then we knew where to put the camera underwater to find the barrels. And so for us, the story conceptualization for the film began with what this film was supposed to sound like. And I think I was also, as we were chatting, this is both related and not related, but last year I was thinking, I could not stop thinking about Jaws, because it was the 50th anniversary Jaws, and I felt like, as the ocean reporter for the LA Times, I was constantly being hit with like Jaws stuff. And I was talking to Chris Lowe at the Shark Lab at Cal State Long Beach, and he said part of the magic of Jaws was that you didn't ever see the shark, right? And it was the fear of the unknown, the fear of what you couldn't see, and that actually made the invisible visible. And that was kind of our approach to Out of Plain Sight. But I think then what you did was you totally turned it on its head, and then really, like, it was just so stunning the way you tapped into just the core of what we were supposed to feel. And I don't know if you want to expand on that, but just, sorry, my thoughts are, this is, I think, part of the magic of art, right? Like, I have so many thoughts connecting so many different parts of like my lived experience and what I'm seeing in the field, and I'm processing in lifetime, and just really grateful to what you've activated in my brain.
And if I could give us a through line here, it's not that we don't see Jaws, it's we hear him.
Yes.
Dun,
Music.
dun. Right? So anyone who's ever experienced that, and I'm part of that generation, knows exactly that sound, right? And so whether it's the land shark that they did as a great parody on Saturday Night Live, or
Sometimes like what you don't
But it's
see
the
is
sound.
scarier than the
Yeah,
actual
exactly,
monster,
yeah.
and that's part of the like continuity. That's part of like kind of the theme of like forever chemicals, right?
yeah, and radiation too. Yeah.
Yes.
And that was, if you you remember the sound of Dave Valentine's, you know, when he goes down and looks at the robots, right, and begins to film them. It's like this incredibly, it's like acid mechanic, like a really weird sound of the machines that are witnessing this ecological disaster. And that was one of the anchors for the sound composition. That was by Drew Schnur, a collaborator for 20 plus years. And so that was one anchor. And the other one was a kind of like a very kind of mournful howling of a mammal, right? So we had the singer that, you know, kind of like goes and kind of just really gets into the very, you know, the painful aspect of seeing these barrels coming down. And then those two kind of extremes get inhabited by story, right? And here is where the Tongva story and the Tongva creation story of star people and ocean people and dolphin people, you know, Patingal, the turtle people, and then Jaiwewish, the human. So that is something that we kind of like are framed by those two sounds. And so it was, of course, the kind of very, you know, we talked a lot about how in the ocean you pretty much hear with your bones, right? There's something so different about how we perceive what our senses are doing. So that was an important one. And then in relation to editing, right? I think my editor, Rahat Mahajan from India, that he just the way in which we were like stretching some scenes and just allowing for that, again, that temporality to be able to, like, for example, when the barrels are falling, and they're falling, and they're falling, and they're falling, because that's what happened. It's like it was 500,000 in 20-something thousand, but in terms of quantities, like, you know, yeah. So
No, we still don't know.
No, we
And I think
still
that's
don't know
the other
what's-
thing that's so compelling about thinking about the deep. When we talk about going deep or something that is deep, it is about this kind of unknown. It's something that feels very profundo, right? It's profound, but it's also something that is maybe that we don't know. So in that tension that you had mentioned in your film, you feel that throughout, the sense of what we don't know, and what I love about Out of Plain Sight is that it doesn't visualize it, the choice is to not actually visualize it, but then to show it in the condor eggs, right? Or to talk about it, how it's passed on, particularly by women, right? So because DDT bioaccumulates in fat, right? You have more sea lions and women, and so the ways in which that's passed on from generation to generation. So again, it brings in this other kind of interspecies kinship that is actually caught up in kind of a violence, right? I mean, Rachel Carson called DDT not a insecticide, but an biocide, right?
Right, like we can't see the chemical, but we are all carriers of its legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that during our symposium, in order for me to become other, right? I think that that's part of my method of just really trying to become whatever I'm studying. So when we were studying the DDT, right, it was reciting. It's like, I am dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane. I am DDT. I'm colorless, odorless. I am diphenyl dichloro. So it was just, I needed to enter into this mantra because there was something about understanding that this is here forever. And so that is the moment where she embraces that barrel, right? Because it is a confrontation that we cannot fight it. I mean, you see in the film that she first, kind of has that curiosity of what is happening, what is this, then fights it. And then it is about, I am. I am what you are, because it is inside of my body. If it's inside of the sea lions, right? It's in the blubber, like as you're saying. It's just, we are it. And therefore, what do we do? And, Donna Haraway puts us staying with the trouble. So that's exactly that moment that it is not about give up. No, on the other hand, it's like, okay, if you are part of me, then I'm going to get to know you, and I'm going to actually, figure you out to kind of like, try to survive as a species, right? So,
So can I ask a question? So I'm fascinated, and I'd love to hear more about your process, because I feel like, so when you reached out to me after the first article came out, you asked for like, who should I talk to? I want to talk to scientists. And I love that you wanted to talk to scientists. You even had Ellie, right, was a scientist on your original team for the See Around Us exhibition. And I, put you in touch with a bunch of folks. For those who came to the symposium or watched the film, there were, you talked to Professor Valentine, Dr. Deming. I'm so curious, what were your conversations with them like? What questions did you ask them? Because I'm sure your questions were not the questions I was asking, which was what is the actual breakdown year and dechlorination rate of DDT, and help me understand all this. But I'm so curious, what kind of questions and answers you needed from them to inform your research, and what you needed to make what we just witnessed and experienced, on the screen.
yeah. No, I love it. You see that we have one of the screenshots of the Zoom. The very first, I think the moment I contacted you, you immediately said, we're having a Zoom tomorrow or something. And you were so kind to invite me. And then I met everybody. So that just opened the doors to be able to, just go deeper. And I think that I'm going to backtrack and then I'm going to answer your question. But in order for me to even begin this project, I usually, put together an interdisciplinary team. So my right-hand person was a scientist from ecology and evolutionary biology, a PhD student that continues to be now the associate director of my counterforce lab. So that to me is critical that we are in that. And then I also brought in Lily Flores Aguilar, who is a PhD student in anthropology and Indigenous culture specialist of the region. So I knew I needed to have that. And so what kind of questions? The first one that was responded right away, funny enough, was Eric Terrell. And then he became so busy that he never really was able to get back. But the questions that always arise were, that, okay, so how can this be solved? Not that I asked that question, but he, just, for me, it was much more about the experience of being and looking and ways of seeing, ways of recording, methods. I'm so interested in how we, again, try to make the invisible visible through the sonar, through all these different optics, sonics. So that is the radar of perception, but that extends to the equipment that we use. So that was interesting to ask about that. But one of the things that struck, and I think it might have been from the Zoom, was that when someone asks, okay, what is the solution? And he said, well, we first need to know the magnitude of the problem. We need to understand the processes, both biological and chemical, that are happening down there and how they affect life. And the reality is that we're not even there. I mean, we're starting to just get a sense of the magnitude. So, so that was with Eric Terrell. And then from Scripps and UCSD. Lihini. Oh, Lihini was fantastic. Lihini Aluwihare, she is a chemist from Scripps as well, from UCSD. And my parents were both chemists. So that was the place that I felt I can enter a little bit through there. And it was such an interesting thing to understand, the physics of it, but also how all of how she investigated those things again. And she was showing me, and again, what apparatus are you using to be able to investigate all the chemistry in the little species that she explores.
Yeah, I remember when my first article came out, there were some of the questions that the marine science community were like chit-chatting about was like, oh my God, how does DDT even interact with seawater? Does it get heavier? Does it move vertically? Does it drop to the sea? And there were some very fundamental questions that we had just stopped asking because we had moved on from the chemical, thinking that we had solved the problem in 1972 when we banned the chemical. And so that's really fascinating. I also love that some of your first questions, basically it sounds like you were trying to deepen your own understanding of how all these different practitioners see the ocean, right? And through what lens. And I felt also a lot of that in the spirit of your work.
And it's interesting because we shot with drone and with all the things, because I thought that I was going to also, kind of like look and give us a sense of the space around. And it really ended up being that I needed us to be within the ocean, like underwater, to never leave and to never think that we are humans again, right? So that was an interesting thing for me, that we just kind of remain in that sensing space.
I think that's one of the things that our symposium was really staging a few weeks ago when we brought together different kinds of storytellers about the ocean. So I think that's one of the important things, and something that our students know very well, is that we all need our interdisciplinary skills for doing this kinds of storytelling. I know that we are maybe towards the end of our discussion here, but we have some time to open it up to the audience. I think someone out there might have a microphone. I see someone. We have such highlights. I'm not sure what I'm seeing here. So,
no, someone with the microphone.
Okay, great. And I encourage our students. I think you've been thinking through this for 10 weeks with us, so please do raise some questions.
It's the last day of class, right?
Exactly.
Last second.
So, you survived.
So as I was watching, I saw two slides in the background that grabbed my attention. I mean, everything grabbed my attention, but there was an anchovy in a little sample, and there was a sock slit extractor. And was that anchovy in the sock slit extractor? Only 1 in 1,000 people who saw those slides would know what it was. Was that a gift? Was that a gift to your parents?
That's beautiful, but that is Lihini's research. And so definitely, I love that it's an anchovy. That's beautiful. Yeah, it was a... Yes. Thank you.
And I believe that there's a recording of our conversation that should be coming up soon. I think, does one of our students have a question?
We have time for 2 more questions.
Okay. I see someone in the back in the center there.
Yeah, I'm one of the students in their class. Yay, last day of class. So I think we've all talked about this regularly, and I know that there was a week that I was actually sick from, but it was one of the weeks that was a similar topic to a previous course that I've taken with Professor DeLoughrey on care. And when it comes to facing a problem that is forever, that is a deep time problem, odorless, colorless, something that is so invasive in our life, similar to microplastics and other like these existential threats that we're facing, as artists, thinkers, and creators, where do you guys find, as people who are kind of confronting that on the front lines of that, where do you find room for that care and like making kinship, staying with the trouble? How do you persevere?
Oh my God, what an amazing question. Thank you so much, Liam. Wow. Well, one of the things that I have been doing in my classes, because I teach so much in terms of histories of violence, empire, ecological extraction. We've done courses on militarism and in ecology. They end up being quite heavy, right? And there's a lot of stuff. I think, this is also the challenge when you're making a documentary or an art piece that's about staying with the trouble rather than having uplifting music at the end and saying, let's all move on. And so, that is one of the challenges. And so what we've been doing in the classes is that we turn to care at the end, because I think one of the things is that in our doom scrolling, we're not seeing the stories of care. We're actually seeing all of this violence, and it feels really overwhelming. But if we think about the very fact that we have the time to sit here and talk to each other about these issues, all the kind of the hands, the invisible, talk about making the invisible visible, all the hands that are behind, all of whether we're talking about the lighting to the cleaning to the people who fed us to people who cared for us to allow us to then have this moment and to have an ability to actually share knowledge together. So those are the things that I try to root myself back into, but I'd be very interested to hear how you two manage
What's
that.
interesting for me is like that was the most difficult part of the film to resolve for myself, because when I hear the word hope alone, right, is like just that is to me so passive, and it leaves us empty, even though we must have it. But I feel that sometimes the distance between where you are and hope, there's got to be little breadcrumbs to get us there. And so in engaging with the Indigenous elders and their kids and the family, everybody, to me there was something that was very clear. Is like the way to get to hope through in the film, at least for me, it was responsibility, reciprocity, and respect. All of those three get me immediately to hope. And that responsibility and reciprocity, the reciprocity is something that it is, just such a core understanding in, Indigenous traditions and Indigenous families, and I'm thinking a lot of our families as well, right? So that is where I close also with a multi-generational song, because it is a way of speaking to each other. We need to listen to each other carefully, so that and that is not only in humans, but to listen to other species as well, is to be able to then we are so interconnected that perhaps there is where I find a little bit of hope, right? And I think there's something very beautiful that Barry Lopez said, that we need the idea of engaging and understanding and giving value to indigenous cultures, whether they are invertebrate, lupin, avian, Aztecan, right? It's like it's a way of being able to listen to it, and that might be a way to arrive at a positive space and care and be kind to all creatures.
Yeah, and to bridge your beautiful insights on hope to your question on care, I think, so I'm an environmental reporter for the LA Times. I cover climate change. I write about all the chemicals that get dumped into the ocean that we can't easily take back. And everyone, I call it the hope question. I get that question all the time. And it's like, how do you stay hopeful? And how much hope do we owe our readers and the people watching the film? And, if you put 10 environmental journalists into a room and ask them what is the right amount of hope, we'll give you 10 different answers. And I think, very generally speaking, if you give someone too much hope at the end of an article, at the end of a film, they are able to put that story down and move on to something else. And we talked a lot about apathy, last week or the last time I was here. And, if you give them not enough hope, that leads to inaction and paralysis and nihilism and F it, no matter what I do, it's not going to fix the problem. And that's also not productive. And so, in the course of the last 15 plus years that I've been writing about climate change and environmental issues and really complicated issues, I realized that, hope is not the emotion that I index on anymore. And it really became clarifying to me, it's responsibility. And once again, I feel so much kinship to what you just said. It's like, can I, rather than give the reader enough hope, whatever enough is, can I give them a sense of responsibility at the end of the article, at the end of the movie, to do something? And a sense of duty to not look away. And that do something doesn't have to be to fix, climate change or to take all the DDT out of the ocean. These solutions are so complicated. They're multi-layered. They're sometimes multi-generational. But it all begins with us being willing to not look away. And that sense of embracing the responsibility to continue to stay engaged, that takes courage. And so ultimately what I am seeking when I'm talking to my sources, when I'm building out a story, when I'm thinking with our cinematographer and our composer, what emotions we're trying to bring to, the audience, it is how do we empower people to care, to not look away? How do we make them feel the courage to continue staying with the trouble? And I think, I love kind of how your answer and your question kind of really bridge together, just the epiphanies that I've kind of reached at this point and just how long I've had to sit with all of these issues.
And also we had mentioned during our symposium that process can also mean going through a lot of grief and a lot of rage, right? I think this is also to stay with the trouble of all the different kind of emotional responses you can have. But I think there's also ways that we can think about this both in a temporal way and things of moving forward. Also think about the people who came before us who didn't have the luxury of saying whether they were hopeful or not, right? Who just did the work. So one of the things we talk about in terms of our sections on care are also about responsibility, accountability, but also that it's a practice labor, right? And it's not, as you know, whether your kinship with your direct family or extended kinship networks can be really, really complicated and messy, right? And so part of that is also sticking with it and it's a labor practice, right? And not just affect.
And every scientist I interview, every scientist that you saw in the documentary, every practitioner and veterinarian, they are still doing this work, not because they think that it is not, there's no meaning to it, right? And what they do is a daily practice of hope, of care, of really leaning into it. And I feel like every time I'm in the field talking to the people who are doing the work, I feel inspired.
And it is daring to feel. Right, I think that's the thing. It's a lot of the times when we begin a class that is very complex, the students do the research and they are utterly depressed. They're devastated. And the idea is, and they tell me, they ask me, it's okay, what do I do with this feeling that I've been not wanting to know, but because of the class and we have to present and we have to engage so deeply, is I am feeling. And that is, we have to start there. And once you start there, then you're able to kind of we are creative people, right? So we're able to then engage in a way that, yes, feel it, cry it, be enraged
and do it together,
and do
right?
it together,
to grieve together rather than to
together.
continue to feel isolated and alone and powerless as an individual.
Yeah, and I mentioned, I think in the commencement speech that at one point gave is your stories matter. Then rage with love, right? Rage with kinship, rage with that interconnectedness that we have.
Is that a good concluding comment? I think so.
We have one more question
Okay.
queued up.
Actually, my question was very related to that. So you guys actually already answered the question. If anybody else, I know my classmates have really great questions wanted to ask.
Hi, actually my question concerns the song choice, and I'm thinking about how the format of the film and screen is so different from the way it's in the exhibition room. And I know you've talked about how the exhibition with a 6 screen is meant for people to walk around, to flow with the water, and that's different format. Being now that today I'm here, and I noticed that actually without my body being able to move around, actually, I pay much more attention to the sound. And the sound quality of the music is absolutely like immaculate here. And there, now after like an hour has passed, I feel like I'm still thinking about a song and my brain is still reciting. And I'm curious about what is it translated into and whether there is some meaning behind the song. And also, yeah, like whether I think there's also I noticed that there's like different reiterations of the sound, including how loud it is throughout different parts of the film. And I wonder if that placement of the different manipulations of that same exact song and the fact that you only choose to use one similar song throughout the film is a deliberate choice, and whether that has anything to do with a storytelling method in the film.
I think that the composition is very complex. It has many, many different layers to it, many voices, many songs. It's not, I think that the Indigenous song, some of them have to do with the creation story. I think that Adelia Sandoval translates some of them herself, when she's talking about the star people going to humans. I think that, there are very different songs. Now, one of the things that it is very interesting about Indigenous song is like there is a beat. There is almost like you're very present in the body. Like it's as if it's your heartbeat. Dong, dong. So that's something that it might sound similar to you, but it's very different music, right? So that's something that kind of like it contrasts very much with the howling of the voice, the human voice, and then the sounds of the machinery, and then the just atmospheric, just something that begins to kind of feel as if there is these critters living and watching and listening. So I think that there was a lot of very, very different moments and movements within the composition.
And that's your next project.
Yes, exactly. My next project very much focused, thank you. You're like queuing a lot of things, thank you. For my next project, our next project is very much focused on bringing in specifically acoustics and bioacoustics and paying a lot of attention and how is it that we begin to understand the world? Last century was very much the time of optics, right? We developed so many things, even, previous centuries, from the microscope to the telescope and all of that. And this century and the future is very much focusing on sonics. So that's a fascinating area because I think that we will understand much more, our world as we develop the technologies for sound.
Yeah, and that's something we're working on, another collaborative project, thinking about the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, which we had mentioned last week. And one of the things that we can stop is actually the push right now to start deep-sea mining in an area that's as large as the continental U.S. And they've already started prospecting, and one of the problems is these machines are like the size of this room, and they're enormous, and they make so much sound, and they're right in the migration area of a lot of whales. But also we know that the biggest migration that happens every day, the biggest biomass, is from the deep sea up to the surface. And so we just don't even know how much damage is going to be happening there. But we do know that in 2023, they discovered 5,000 new species. So we know that this is a really rich, very complex area. So I think on the slides, you might have seen one of the campaigns against deep sea mining. So keep your ears open for that.
With that, we're going to start closing out. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming.